Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Guys, I'm going to have to keep this really short and fire through this. So, absolutely loads been happening. Seems like the Western media doesn't care. But we have got Iran threatening to obliterate Israel. We've got US Marines deploying to the Mediterranean. We've got more news on Russia sending migrants to go to the front line. We've got Belarus strengthening its air defences. We're going to talk about that. We've also got RAF Typhoons escorting reconnaissance missions now in the Black Sea. And we've got Ukrainian men who are trying to flee conscription. And I'm going to put into this context how this model could be imposed on us if you live in the UK and also if you live in the United States or wherever you live. Because when you see these things happen around the world, you see a model working in a certain country. And you know, politicians are not that clever, so they just look around and see, right, what country has recently done this, right, and we just copy that model. And remember what Rishi Sunak said on his, on his little TV speech about being able to take people's driving licenses away, being able to stop people having, having finance, banking options. So, guys, let's just begin and get into the weeds. So, those of you who are watching this channel and our other channel, you know that. And guys, if you've not done so already, please hit that subscribe button and that like, and give me some comments in the description below. In the comments below, really helps me out with the algorithm when you do that. So, Iran and the Middle East is the big play for the United States, and I said this, I saw this coming back in December, and I identified it. I said you're going to see it in February, and you're seeing these diversions now. And look at a geopolitical spectrum, and look what's happening. I've not changed my mind. I've not changed my opinion on what I said. And you're seeing that now. Look at it with the glasses or with the tint that there's going to be this diversions. America's going to focus on the Middle East, potentially with China. The UK and Europe are going to focus in Ukraine with the Russian threat. If you look at everything now with that, you see the roads become very, very clear. So let me just read what's being said with regards to Iran threatening Israel. So, well, I'll read it. All options, including the full involvement of... So this is basically Iran now saying this. All options, including the full involvement of resistance fronts, are on the table, Iranian officials said, referring to the alliance of armed groups backed by Iran, including Hezbollah, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Yemen's Houthis, and Iraqi Shia militias. So guys, let's just think about that for a moment. Iran, they're saying that they may call for an uprising of these militant groups. This won't just be in those regions, guys, okay? If Iran call for this uprising, I don't want to use the word jihad, but this rising, whatever this article is referring to, this would mean predominantly that anybody who identified with one of those groups, so Hezbollah, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Tell me, guys, if you live in the UK, are there people in the UK who are sympathetic to Hamas, to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, to Yemen's Houthis, to probably not so much Iraqi Shia militias and Hezbollah? Are there people on the streets in the UK that are sympathetic to them? I don't know. I've not seen any. I wouldn't know, guys. Let me know what you think. So Iran is calling for saying that it's a potential that these guys could be activated. They could be called up if Iran gives the word. Remember, guys, okay, this won't just be isolated to the Middle East. The threats come from Iran after former Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz declared on Tuesday, and I quote, "We can plunge Lebanon completely into darkness and take apart Hezbollah's power in days." Now, the reason I've brought that to you guys, and the reason I'm telling you guys about this, is because it seems around the world that power facilities Remember, I did a whole video on it. You know, it goes all the way from domestic use, commercial use, large commercial use, industrial use. You've got power lines, you've got substations, you've got, I guess, stations. You've got power generation, which is hydrocarbons, nuclear, wind, solar, whatever you want to, you know, it's a whole infrastructure. And, you know, these seem to be now military targets. In the Ukraine-Russia conflict, both sides are targeting each other's energy supply. They're soft targets. I've said many times that in the UK, our energy supply is such a soft target. It's easily sabotageable by foreign actors, by people potentially in this country who don't share our values, who don't have any tacit that's the wrong word to use, who don't have any tacit fellowship, who haven't signed the British social contract where, you know, we're kind of nice to each other. We don't have wars with each other on the same streets or whatever. But, you know, that could be, and I fear, I really do, that will be a sign, that will be the things to come in the UK if you live in Europe, especially Europe. Europe's a lot more vulnerable than we are in the UK to energy. I still think that water is going to be the big one, but from what we can see, the military target, where they can strike it with munitions, that seems to be the way forward. Because remember, if you go to try and do a sabotage attempt on an electrical cable, you run the risk of electrocuting yourself. And that's the reason why I put the water threat in the UK, higher than the electricity threat of sabotage. Because, you know, if you go to sabotage a water pipe, worst case scenario, you're going to get a bit wet. You know, you see, you've got to look at the risk versus the reward. And while the energy system is it's the high reward, it also runs the high risk. That's why for militaries who can fire munitions, throw things over, you know, over borders, things that with jet engines and kinetic options, it becomes really easy because you're not wasting any manpower for that. Keeping that in mind, what's going on there with Israel, with Hezbollah, with Hamas, with all those regional. Let's not forget Syria. Nobody's talking about Syria at the moment. Remember, Syria is allied ridiculously with Russia. And again, guys, I'm going to throw some biblical prophecy in there. When we see Russia attack Israel, we can all just say that we're in the end of days. It's the end days. Yeah, so keeping all that in context, while you've got that in your head, the US is sending 3 amphibious ships, the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which will have tanks, trucks, aircraft, 2,200 Marines. Why? Why does this matter? Well, I'm going to tell you now, guys, and all the links to these articles are in the description, so you know I'm not waffling. Where are we, guys? So, 2 US defense officials told blah, 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 blah. Here we are, guys. It comes, however, amid increased concerns in Washington that Israel may launch an air campaign and potentially a ground invasion to push Hezbollah's elite Radwan forces back from the border with Israel. Guys, so let's look at these 2 potentially separate articles and look what they're saying. So the first article we talked about there, you know, it's talking about threats. It's talking about the, the wider uprising of these militant groups. Then we're looking at now, Israel's thinking about a ground invasion into Lebanon. Guys, you know, these things are happening for a reason. You know, that you don't just send, you know, these, you know, Marine Expeditionary Units into these locations without a reason for it. You know, so I think they're there as backup for the Israelis. They're there for, you know, show of force and to show solidarity. You know, so when these things flare up, it won't just be in the Middle East, guys, all right? It's going to go a lot bigger than the Middle East in this particular incident. And that's why I think the UK is not openly getting involved, and Europe are not openly getting involved in this conflict, because we have, you know, we have a huge potentially sympathetic population, sympathetic demographic living in among us. And if we were to get openly involved in this conflict, we would see this a lot more. We would see a lot more concentrated protests that could potentially turn violent, and there could be a lot of problems. That's why we're seeing this diversions, guys. Do you see now why this diversions is happening? I've been telling you it's happening since December. Anyway, guys. So the other day I wrote about, I spoke about the migrants in Russia being sent to the front line to dig, to do menial tasks, to basically be, dogs' bodies and low paid labour. Now, it's come out again. There's more people reporting on this now, but there's confliction in the reports. Some reports are saying that these guys are actually being made to fight. Other people are saying that they're not made to be fight. The reality is we don't actually know. And I think the fog of war, we're never going to know either. The reason I'm bringing it up again is because of this sentence. Migrants sent to fight. Guys, you guys told me about it like months ago. I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know if this is going to happen in the US. I don't know if this is going to happen in the UK, but it certainly looks like it's happening in Russia. And again, what did I just say? Literally, when you want to do something in your own country, look at another country that's done it, look at another country that's done it successfully, and just cut and paste that model, because guess what? Our politicians are lazy, they get paid whether they work or whether they don't, so it makes no sense for them to formulate their own plan when they can just cut and paste a plan that somebody else has used successfully. I don't know whether this is going to happen, guys. I'm going to caveat that now. If it does happen, it will be absolutely wild. But remember, this 10,000 that people are reporting about, this is 10,000 of 30,000 who, well, let me just read here quickly, guys. Shh. So this is from the Kiev Post, so they are biased. The 10,000 individuals are out of 30,000 new citizens authorities have reportedly caught who shirked their obligation to register for military service. So there you've got it, guys, all right? It looks like from these articles that the Russians are bringing migrants in with the sole intention on getting them to join the military and getting them to go and fight. I don't know if this is a good model. Personally, I don't think it's a good model. It wouldn't be a good model for the way NATO is set up and the way NATO military operates. Obviously I can only speak for the British military, but the way the British military, which is part of NATO, is set up, it's set up with professional soldiers who want to fight, who want to work, who want to do that job. When you start getting people who don't want to work, who don't want to do the job, you've got to manage them a totally different way. And if you want to know how that gets managed, go look at how they managed that situation in Stalingrad in the Second World War. Guys, so much has been happening. So Belarus, on top of all this, guys, we're going to switch now to what's been happening on the Belarus-Ukraine border. So Belarus are fortifying its border defences with Ukraine. They're deploying more air defence systems that are obviously Russian. Guys, this air war is coming. We can't. If anybody thinks that this air war is not coming, you're absolutely deluded. It has to come. It's got to come. It's going to be the next stage. When's it going to come? Pretty soon. I said everything is going to kind of phase on when these F-16s start flying. So the Belarusians, they're protecting their critical infrastructure. Remember that, guys, now, okay? Because everybody's seeing how vulnerable their own critical infrastructure is. We mean, obviously, the main one we mean is obviously power, but that goes down to electricity, that is electricity. Power, water, all your utilities, your basic needs, all that sort of stuff's going to get targeted. But nothing works without energy, nothing works without electricity. And these are soft targets. These targets were never built to be, to withstand any sort of attack. From what I'm being told, Zhytomyr seems to be a key region of importance and a key region for both militaries on the Belarusian side and the Ukrainian side. Why? Well, Zhytomyr, it's a short land grab from Belarus down to Zhytomyr, and if the Belarusians can surge down from the north and take control of Zhytomyr, then that would essentially cut off all aid west to east to Ukraine, to Kiev, because they're the two main supply routes. They're the two main supply routes by road, and there's the main rail route that goes through that region. So for the Belarusians or the Russians pushing down into that region and being able to control Zhytomyr, it would be a huge strategic advantage for the Belarusians, for Russia, because the West would have to redivert its supplies, they'd have to redivert everything, and it would take time. And if there's a big attack coming, you kind of need as much time as you've got. Meanwhile, in the Black Sea, you've got British Typhoon fighter planes escorting reconnaissance planes over the Black Sea. Now, remember a couple of days ago I said Russia are talking about closing that airspace down. So this is the airspace that's contested now in and around the Black Sea. You've got the UK flying reconnaissance aircraft over there, and remember, what's actually happening in that aircraft, it doesn't really matter. It's the perception to the Russians, and the Russians believe that those reconnaissance aircraft are identifying targets in Crimea, and other places, then feeding that information back to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are then attacking it. So it makes perfect sense for the Russians to want to stop that from happening. So they would impose a no-fly zone, flight ban over that area. If they do that, that means they need to enforce it, because if they don't enforce it, they will just lose face. There'll be a laughing stock, and they won't have credibility. Now, on the flip side of that, if the Russians do claim that there's a no-fly zone, claim that the airspace is closed, and they don't enforce it, and the Britain, NATO, and they stay away from that airspace, it will look like they're cowards, and it'll look like the Russians have won and the Russians are dictating. So it seems like it's really heating up in that airspace over the Black Sea. Remember, back in September 22, there was a Russian Su-27 fired at one of these reconnaissance aircraft. Now, I don't know what happened with the missile. I don't know what happened with the, I don't know whether it was electronic countermeasures on the aircraft. I don't know whether the Russians fired a missile and then they realised what had happened and aborted it. Or, equally the missile could have just failed. But remember, we didn't get told about this until months after the event. So there'll be things that are happening now that we're not being told of and we're not being privy to. Remember, guys, I did a video earlier on today about an asteroid that came ridiculously close to Earth, and we only found out about it 2 weeks ago. So the reality is we only get drip-fed information, and it's up to us to see what information we've got and try and predict what's coming next and make best case scenario or worst case scenario, whichever way you're looking at it. So, guys, Ukrainians now are trying to flee Ukraine amidst this conscription, amidst these conscription laws. What I'm going to do now, guys, I'm just going to read you something quickly, and then I'm going to ask you guys if this seems a little bit like what Rishi Sunak was talking about. And remember, if you want to do something, why try and reinvent the wheel? Just cut and paste what another country's done and put it into your own legislation. So where are we? Hang on, let me look, guys. Yeah. So we've got basically an article. I'll read you the I'll read you the headline. I'm not made for war. The men flee in Ukraine to evade conscription. And guys, as ex-military, somebody, I think I know a little bit about the military. In the British model and NATO models, I'm sure, I totally agree. You can't have people in your ranks that don't want to be there. It causes problems. It causes, inadequacies, because that person who does want to be there, he has to then look after this guy, and then somebody else has to deal with it, and then they cause problems. They just cause problems. It's not worth. I would rather have, less men who want to fight than more men who don't want to fight. Because if they don't want to fight, guess what? They won't. And it just slows things down, and it's not a good thing. So a few things we can tell just by looking at the headline. They're making people fight who don't want to fight. So that kind of means they're running out of men. Where have they all gone? You tell me, guys. You know, we're led to believe that certain things are happening, and if they're grabbing people off the streets who don't want to fight, that's not a good thing. So, where are we? Yeah, here we are, guys. To fill up the ranks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last April signed a controversial law that lowered the mobilization age from 27 to 25. Under the new guidelines, here we are, guys, draft evaders can lose their driving license, have their bank accounts frozen, and property seized. Guys, this was in April when Vladimir Zelensky announced this. It was last week that Rishi Sunak came out and he said if people dodge the draft, they will have their driving licenses taken away from them and their financial assets seized. Or I'm not sure how he worded it correctly. But guys, look what's happening. Remember, I don't think there'll ever be a draft as such in the UK. But what they will do potentially is they could say, I need to caveat this quite a lot, guys, because there's a lot of people complaining about things that, well, about if I don't caveat it and I say that it's going to happen, then it's misinformation. But what I would say is this would be a case of, okay, guys, right, nobody has to join the military. That's fine. You can choose. But if you don't join the military, we take away your driver's license and you've got no access to finances. You've got no access to your bank accounts. And if you own any property, we're going to seize it. But don't worry, you don't have to join the military. This is not a draft. Can you see where I'm going with that, guys? They will make it so that they could make it so that it becomes more or less a draft. But before this happens, there would obviously be a large recruitment drive. They would want the first wave of people. They would be the people who they want, the people who actually want to do the job, because they are worth more valuable than the people who don't. Guys, that is it. I'm going to back to grid and I'll see you tomorrow.